Since we've spent the last 6 videos explaining why you should not buy a cheap entry-level laptop from any manufacturer, it's only appropriate that we have a look at a better alternative for people who either can't or don't want to move up to another price bracket. So with that in mind, today's victim is a 2019-era Lenovo ThinkPad T590 in a fairly luxurious configuration for what it is. This one is equipped with a Core i7-8665U, 16GB of memory, a 1080p IPS touchscreen, and would you believe it, 4G mobile connectivity. Wow. In Australia, you can easily find these laptops for around $400, including a 1-year warranty, making them an identically priced drop-in alternative to something like Lenovo's awful IdeaPad Slim 1, which thoroughly embarrassed itself in our last review. So for this video, we're going to review the T590 as normal, but keep a running tally of advantages over that IdeaPad as we go. The design of Lenovo's T-Series has always been completely sane and sensible, being a big black slab of a 15-inch laptop with a drop hinge at the rear, ports on the left and right, and a smooth surface underneath, making it comfortable to use on your lap. Fit and finish on these was always what you'd politely call industrial, but it holds up pretty well over time as long as the machine's been treated with care. Even with a few years worth of knocks and scuffs, this laptop feels solid and purposeful, with the soft touch coating adding some warmth and friendliness. That is a stark contrast to the cheap, rough-edged plastic of the IdeaPad, so we're kicking things off with 1 point to Team ThinkPad. Connectivity on a machine of this age can be hit or miss, but thankfully the T590 comes with a full set of ports, including 2 full-featured USB Type-Cs with DisplayPort and Thunderbolt 3, and even an RJ45 Ethernet jack. Unfortunately, other than a single USB-A port and the Ethernet jack, all the other ports on this machine are soldered on, so if and when you wear any of these out, it's going to require either a full logic board change or a very careful repair involving a soldering iron and questionable longevity. Despite that serviceability failure, connectivity is a clear win for the ThinkPad. The display takes a whopping 1.26 kilograms of force to open from fully closed, and then 462 grams to move in either direction from a 90-degree angle. Those are remarkably high numbers, and while this could be affected somewhat by the hinges stiffening up with age, the action is still extremely smooth and quiet. With such a large amount of force being transmitted through the structure, you'd certainly hope it's solid enough to cope with it, so let's have a look inside. With all the bits out of the way, you're immediately presented with a massive plate of molded magnesium spanning the entire top case. This plate acts as a solid backbone for the laptop, with all major components bolting directly into molded-in standoffs. Hinge brackets are directly attached via reinforced screw bosses at 3 points on both sides. This is an ideal setup for durability, and any laptop that's genuinely worth your time will look like this on the inside. Unfortunately, of course, most don't. Things seem to unravel slightly inside the lid behind the display bezel, where it's immediately obvious that we've got the suboptimal arrangement of screw bosses sunken into thin plastic standoffs. That's not great, but remember, this is reinforced plastic and not the usual ABS rubbish. And there's also a metal reinforcement bracket running the height of the display. Taking a look at the hinge assembly in isolation, this is a fascinating fully molded design that looks like it would help to spread certain loads out over the large area making direct contact, minimizing forces taken directly by the screw standoffs, particularly when the lid's opened. T590s have proven to be very durable in the field, so while this setup looks marginal, good material choices and engineering mean it does hold up, so we're giving this a pass and awarding the ThinkPad yet another point. Propped up by that decent enough set of hardware is a 15.6-inch IPS type display. Predictably enough, this panel is nothing impressive at all, with only the contrast ratio turning in a particularly good performance by the low standards of an IPS panel. This screen falls short of covering the basic sRGB color gamut, and peak brightness is woeful at less than 200 nits after calibrating out the hideously strong blue cast this display shows out of the box. It's still completely usable indoors, but it won't put up much of a fight against bright sunlight. With all that being said, this display outperforms most new laptops in the same price bracket, and there is a 4K panel with full Adobe RGB coverage available in these, which would undoubtedly be a much nicer experience if you can find one. Compared directly with the IdeaPad though, this is a mind-blowingly superior screen, so that's another point to the ThinkPad. One of the more recognizable parts of a ThinkPad is its almost but not quite unique combination of a trackpad and track point, both of which are present here. If you've gotten used to more modern trackpads, you're likely to find both of these pointing devices a bit of a disappointment, since they're Synaptics products from the dark ages predating precision touchpads, so there's quite a bit of input lag and jitter in the movement of the cursor. That said, both the separate and integrated buttons have a lovely solid action, and the trackpad is very solidly mounted and doesn't rattle at all. The full-size keyboard features a full-size number pad and a white backlight with an annoying habit of turning itself off. In typical ThinkPad fashion, the key mechanisms themselves have an unusually long stroke and the keycaps are nicely dished and extremely stable. This keyboard is far nicer to type on than what you'd find in cheaper machines, and there's absolutely no rattling nor flexing whatsoever anywhere in the keyboard deck thanks to that strong magnesium frame. By the way, welcome to what I think is the first Nuclear Notebook video in which I don't complain about non-replaceable keyboards. Hallelujah. Overall, this is a proven combination of input devices, and this setup is vastly nicer, vastly more durable, and infinitely more repairable than what you get on the IdeaPad. 3 points. Audio is controlled by a Realtek ALC3287 chip, which seems to predominantly be used in Lenovo laptops and may be a custom chip, so it's hard to find precise specifications for this one. Lenovo specifies 2 watts per channel going into the inbuilt speakers, which are a pair of nice-looking rectangular drivers sharing a fairly small common cabinet and firing directly upward just below the display. Even though the sound is nothing to get excited about, this setup is far better than what you'll find in cheaper machines, and the upward firing position is always preferable. Given what we're comparing it to, I'd say audio quality is another easy win for this machine. Storage is a 256GB Samsung PM981A, which is a PCIe 3 NVMe SSD. This drive is equipped with TLC NAND flash and a Samsung 5-core drive controller with DRAM. No cost cutting here. Read and write speeds are excellent, being about as fast as these PCIe 3 drives can get. Great stuff for a 6-year-old laptop, although it is nothing special by modern standards. Wireless connectivity is provided by an Intel 9560 chip supporting AC Wi-Fi and Bluetooth 5. It would be nice to swap this out with more modern AX Wi-Fi, but you can't because for no good reason it's soldered onto the board. Lame. Buried in the ghastly mess of antenna cables, this particular machine also features a Fibocom L850GL card supporting LTE and WCDMA wireless internet for the 3 people in the world who could use it. I think integrated mobile connectivity in laptops is silly, so I've got no interest in testing this out. Unfortunately, it's not possible to yoink the LTE card out for better Wi-Fi or a second SSD as the slot is keyed differently. Since the IdeaPad has socketed Wi-Fi, we're begrudgingly awarding it 1 point. Boo. The elderly 55 watt-hour battery fitted to this unit is still happily reporting 55 watt-hours, and that is almost definitely a bold-faced lie. Since it's refusing to report its current capacity correctly, we're flying blind on this one. In my usual heavy internet test, the battery gave up after only 3 hours and 43 minutes. Sitting idle on the Windows desktop, it managed to cling on for just 7 hours and 28 minutes. Yep, this goose is cooked. If, like me, you do need to replace the battery in one of these, you'll be delighted to find that not only are genuine Lenovo batteries still readily available, but the battery is also super easy to replace, being held in by 3 screws and a couple of clips. Lovely. The good-looking CPU fitted to this machine is Intel's Core i7-8665U. This is the first generation of Intel's ULV chips moving to a quad-core design, and despite a few enhancements here and there, it's effectively 4 14nm Skylake cores choked down to 15 watts. That might sound bad, and it is, but as you'll see in the performance section, this chip is still looking pretty crunchy when the room's full of potatoes. Taking up the least space possible on that Core i7 is an Intel UHD 620, and this right here is the Achilles heel of this system. This is Intel graphics from the dark age, and a low-end variant at that, so set your expectations appropriately. Memory fitted to this unit is 16GB of DDR4 2400 in single channel, which is unfortunately soldered directly onto the motherboard. As a consolation prize, there's still a single slot for upgrades, but there's no use for more than 16 gigs of memory in a machine like this, so it would have been nice if it was simply dual channel from the factory. Still, there is a socket, so that's 1 for the ThinkPad. The T590's cooling system is as close to basic as they get, with a single heat pipe wicking heat away to a single fan blowing out the right-hand side. All major components are made out of copper, and there's the unusual addition of a temperature probe attached to the end of the fin stack. The cold plate surface is machined to a pretty nice finish with no obvious scoring or pitting, and there are a full 4 screws anchoring it to the CPU for even pressure distribution. Without the fan, the cooler assembly weighs 43 grams. This compares favorably to the coolers used in cheaper laptops with similar power budgets, so this cooler will absorb an above average amount of heat in burst workloads without needing to kick the fan speed up. Everything about this setup is a solid step above what you get in a typical cheap laptop, so that's another 1 for the ThinkPad. It's a basic expectation that a 15-watt chip will be able to run at 15 watts, but you can't take anything for granted, so to get a clear picture of how the T590 copes with a sustained workload, we've run Cinebench R23 for a full 30 minutes with the machine flat on the desk in its highest performance mode. Sensor data is logged approximately every second. After a very brief, half-hearted romp up to 25 watts, the CPU rapidly flops back down to 17 watts and then gradually wafts towards its 16 watt rating, ultimately stabilizing at just about 15.6 watts. Seems like Lenovo took the TDP rating very seriously on this one. Core frequency follows a very similar pattern, rocketing up to the peak boost speed of 4.8 GHz before plummeting straight back down to earth and slowly sinking to a 2.4 GHz floor. Base clock speed is rated at 1.9 GHz on these, so it's operating well above spec. If you're unfamiliar with what core temperatures usually look like in these machines, you might want to sit down for this one. Yep. In completely typical fashion for this sort of office machine, the T590 is effectively using core temperature to regulate the power delivery, so it romps up to 100 degrees under load and pretty much refuses to budge. Remember that high core temperature readouts are usually not a bad thing and don't mean other components are running hot. This is, after all, only 15 watts of heat, and these 14nm Intel chips have been proving for the better part of a decade that they can do this all day, every day until the heat death of the universe. External case temperatures after an extended load test are kept nice and cool with only the slightest warm spot above and below the heatsink. Neither the ThinkPad nor the IdeaPad get a point for this section, since while the IdeaPad runs its CPU nearly 30 degrees cooler, it does so with far more noise emissions from the cooler. When it comes to performance, I was genuinely surprised by how well this aging low-wattage Core i7 compares to the chips currently available in entry-level machines. In fact, compared to the similarly priced IdeaPad 1's Athlon 7120U, the older chip is anywhere from 40% to more than 100% faster without even using any more power. It's important to remember that the IdeaPad ships with only 4GB of soldered-on RAM, so a lot of the performance delta here is simply due to the ThinkPad coming with 4 times as much memory. Still, at current prices, this is the second cheapest laptop in these charts, and it compares favorably on price to performance with everything else here. ThinkPad 1, IdeaPad emphatically 0. Solid benchmark performance translates perfectly into solid performance in general use. For most simple tasks, the T590 is indistinguishable from a far newer computer with absolutely none of the lag and endless loading screens plaguing the IdeaPad. As long as you're sticking to more basic tasks that don't call for more performance or a better display, you can get along just fine on one of these. Now, I'm not too sure anyone's getting pumped to try gaming on an Intel UHD 620, but it's completely out of the question with single channel RAM, so for this section I've chucked in an additional stick for dual channel mode. This was always an extremely weak GPU, and with a 15 watt cap, there's only so much you can expect from this one. 2015's Dying Light, which has become our de facto potato benchmark, runs a hell of a lot better than it did on the IdeaPad 1, but since it's still far from a nice experience, it's a pretty hollow victory. Still, ThinkPad 1, IdeaPad -1 because what the hell is this garbage? So, we have a very obvious winner. Having proven itself to be a solid, reliable, and fast enough laptop over 6 years, the ThinkPad T590 earns itself an official Nuclear Notebook rating of Certified Tank, and a strong recommendation that anyone shopping at the low end consider looking into a refurbished and warranted ThinkPad T series, or something from the very similar Dell Latitude 5000 or 7000 series instead. Believe me, you'll be doing yourself and the planet a favor. I'm sure a lot of people watching this video will be curious about the lack of Linux testing, and of course, yes, the T590 runs Linux beautifully, as does the IdeaPad 1, but we've kept the review within the same format as the last 6 videos to make the comparisons easier. This is the last Nuclear Notebook video that will focus solely on Windows performance, since we've revamped our testing methodology to be thoroughly Linux-centric moving forward. For now though, and on an unusually positive note, I'll see you next time, where we move up in the world from bottom-dwelling potatoes to some gaming-grade garbage.